Good morning, and I'm glad each and every one come out this morning. I hope we can help you to learn how to grow a vegetable garden and get lots of vegetables out of it. But only God can make it grow, but we got to do our part too.
We'd like to make an announcement at the very beginning, and that is that if we're going to talk fairly quickly, and these things move, and sometimes you're trying to write a note and you didn't get it down till the next thing was said. So what I want you to know is there is a workshop presenters sheet that Sally has. And yes, and if you need one and don't have one, our email address is on there. You can email us and we can send you the notes if you would like to have the notes.
Who we are, so know who to email.
We're okay. We're Ivan and Phyllis Valier, and we're down under Friday from 9:30 to 1 o'clock. So it's on the presenters.
The notes are 11 sheets. So if you want them, you'll have to email Phyllis's email, and she'll email everything back to you.
Okay, thank you.
So we're all set to go now. We got to. We're going to take you right through from how to prepare the land until harvesting. But before we start, we got a lot to start. Let's have a word of prayer. Our Father, this morning, we thank Thee for this another day in our life. We thank Thee for all You do for us. And we thank You have life in the seeds, and it's only through Your grace, through Your power that the seeds grow. Help us to learn how to do our part so that when we put the seeds in the ground, when we prepare it, we will have a bountiful harvest. We know You're always there for us. We ask these things in Your name, Jesus. Amen. So Phyllis is already introduced. My name is Ivan. Phyllis here. She'll be she's my helper here. So if I don't get everything right, she'll tell me here. Basics. The very first thing you got to have some soil. Like this is kind of sod here. It's not ready to plant a garden in. There's different types of soil. There's sandy soil, which is good for growing peanuts. Now, potatoes like a lighter soil. My neighbor grows potatoes. I'll touch this later on. He grows potatoes. They're blue potatoes on the outside, white on the inside, and potato bugs don't eat them. But he said when you put barnyard manure, cow manure on it, then you get scabby potatoes for 2 or 3 years. So you kind of be careful. If you want to test your soil, it's all right. But more important, testing your soil is having it worked right and keeping the weeds out of it. Now there's clay soil. I don't know what kind of soil is underneath here. It might be clay. I know when I lived over at the highway at Highway 62 and Delora Road, I had that house that's still standing. The other 5 houses around it was all burnt in the last 30 years. But the house I lived in is still standing. But that heavy clay. Where we live, it's kind of a sandy loam, which is excellent for planting. It's soft enough, and the vegetables grow well in it. You're going to need some tools. You're going to need some hand tools like a trowel. We'll be demonstrating some of this in our second part. We're going to demonstrate how to plant some of this stuff and transplant. We'll show you some of the tools. A hoe, larger tools like that, but a hoe is a larger tool. A shovel, spade, and a tiller, and a plow. Now the larger tools, like you need a plow. If you got sod like this, you're going to have to if you don't have a tractor with a plow, you're going to have to get a farmer to come with a tractor and a plow and plow up your sod. I had one family, they called me, said, we got our field plowed now. Is it ready to plant? No, you're not ready to plant. You got to work up the land. A lot more than that. In fact, you got to go over it many times until you're ready to plant. And when you take sod like this, it's going to take you 2 or 3 years to get all the grass out of it. Remember, they seed this stuff down, and if the farmers haven't seeded it down, nature seeds it down, and there's a lot of grass, and it's hard to get rid of it. But you got to keep at it. Now, when you want seeds, you're going to have to decide what you want to grow. And there's seed catalogs out there. We will be showing you later on where this catalog, this is TNT seeds, but if you go on the computer and ask for seed catalogs, they will send you one if you ask. With this catalog, I don't think they sent us one last year, but they did before. We go online and we purchase the seeds through online. And you're going to have to decide what kind of seeds you want, and you should be purchasing these seeds long before you need them. Now you can you can buy seeds from almost any store, even a dollar store. You can buy them cheap. Sometimes when you get seeds from the dollar store, they've sat around for some time, and they're not always the kind of they're not always they won't always germinate because they sat too long. They're cheap though, but we buy seeds there, and most of the time they're all right. But there's certain type of seeds, certain type of things I grow that you cannot buy at a dollar store or even at a hardware grocery store. You have to go to a seed catalog someplace where they grow these specialized seeds. Now you see here the types of seeds. These are beets. We're going to go through some of these. The ones on the left are cinderal beets. They're the type we grow. They grow, I got some I'll show you. They're not fully grown yet. They're only about 10 inches long now. They will grow up to 14, 15 inches long and 3-inch diameter. They're very sweet. You don't have to worry about them being planted too close together much because just the roots in the ground, they kind of push themselves apart. The other type is Detroit dark red, the round beet. There's other type of beets, I guess, I don't know, but these are the two main ones. You got to plant them at least 4 inches apart. And beets like carrots and some other things, when you plant them fairly thick because the seeds don't auto germinate, and you got to thin them after. We'll talk about that later. Corn. There are many different varieties of corn. I like to grow the northern extra sweet. We brought 4 cobs with us this morning. We'll show it to you later. It has 12 rows of corn on it, and it's quite long, but you can get golden bantam, which my parents used to grow. It had 8 rows on it, very small cobs. But there's all kinds. In the seed catalog, you'll see at least 2 pages of corn. You can grow Indian corn, which has got many colors. It's harder to chew. You can even grow popcorn. But popcorn is like any other grain. If you grow it, you got to wait till it dries, and then you got to, I don't know what they call thrashing it, but you got to take the kernels off. By the way, when I'm talking about that, any beans like green beans, lima beans, string beans, these kind of beans, if you let them mature, they will get dry after a while, and you can husk them, and you can keep the beans like the little white beans you buy that you bake, and you can use them after like that. We like to freeze them or you can can them, but we like to freeze them when they're still green, and we use them that way. It's a lot more work. We got something to do that, but you can't keep beans that way. Our next one's a cauliflower. There's many different types of cauliflower and many different colors. We like to grow white cauliflower. We'll be talking about it later on. And at the end here, I will show you the type of cauliflower we grow. We start ours just in the garden. And the cauliflower right now is up about 2 feet high and starting to curl. We'll have heads pretty soon. And broccoli. This is a hybrid. As the cauliflower we grow with hybrid. Now some people don't like hybrids. There's no GMO in this catalog. I've read someplace they don't put GMO in it. Actually, most of the stuff, a lot of the apples, strawberries are really a kind of a hybrid, because you plant an apple seed or a strawberry seed, you probably won't get the same kind of a berry or apple you had before. That's how they develop new varieties. They plant the seeds, and if they get something they like, then they graft it in a tree like an apple tree. Strawberry plants, you take a plant from the mother plant, that's this runner, and that's what you plant every year. You don't plant the seeds. It's the same thing with potatoes. You split the potato, you take an eye and you plant each potato with an eye, so you get the same kind. Like you want Yukon Gold, you don't plant the seeds from that. You plant the eye of the potato, the eyes from the potato. This particular hybrid broccoli we grew broccoli before, and it would come out little wee heads, little wee things. But this one gets nice big heads. I brought 3 heads with me today. It just matured this last week. But when we cut this head off, 4 or 5 will come to take its place. When we cut them off, it keeps producing right till the frost comes. This is an excellent producer and it makes nice heads. I changed a few years ago. You have to kind of change, think of what you. Sometimes you got to experiment. Let's put it that way. And we don't always have a success. I will tell you that. We try our best, but sometimes things do go wrong. And we will have time for questions. We're going to do some demonstrations on the last part after 11, the last hour and a quarter. But if you have questions, there'll be time for questions at the end. Next thing is string beans. There's 2 different types of beans. There's pole beans and there's the bush type beans. We have grown pole beans. We prefer growing the bush type beans. The bush type beans take more room. The pole beans take less room. And I put poles up 12 feet high and they keep climbing. They come back down. I don't know how high they climb. Now if you put pole beans alongside of your wall or something to climb on, they'll climb on that. Or you put poles and they'll climb up the pole. The pole beans tend to be a little bit fatter. They tend to be a little bit tougher to chew. And they grow more or less 1 bean at a time too. But the bush beans, sometimes you can pull a whole handful off at once, 3 or 4 at a time. The one lady we knew, she liked bush beans. She says, or not bush beans, but pole beans. She said they're tougher. So when I got my teeth in, I know I'm chewing something. She liked the pole beans. Now the bush beans, these are purple beans. You see in the picture, we grow purple beans, we grow yellow beans and green beans. Now the yellow beans are green when they're growing, but just before they mature, they turn yellow. So you know when to pick them. The purple beans, when you cook them, they turn green. But they do take more room in the garden. They're higher in antioxidants too. Cucumbers. To your right. Yeah, to your right. It's to your left. To your left is English cucumbers. They're what they call the burpless ones. We grow them. I brought 1 of them. I brought 1 of the pickling cucumbers. We grow straight 8 too sometimes. The pickling cucumbers come on a little bit earlier. I eat them too. You don't have to have them just for pickles. The English cucumbers, I've grown one year. I think it was 17 inches long and 2.5 inches big. But one I got today is only about 1 foot or something like that. They're just starting now. And when you come to make pickles with cucumbers, Phyllis makes pickles with all kinds of cucumbers. If you want them all the same size, you can buy a basket within a certain size, but she just, with a dill pickle, she peels them and cuts them long ways. But if you want to make sweet pickles, you can cut them the other way. It doesn't matter. I can't see any difference in the taste whether the cucumber's a big cucumber or small cucumber. Cucumbers you harvest green normally. A ripe cucumber turns yellow. And they do make relish out of that, but we like our cucumbers green. Now, we don't use a lot of pickles. She only makes pickles every 3 or 4 years because we only use a jar or 2 a year. Yeah, if you want recipes, Phyllis has recipes for it. She'll be talking more later about how to use this stuff. Potatoes. Here we have some potatoes. We have white potatoes and yellow potatoes, Yukon Gold and Kennebec, and the purple, I don't know what they are. The catalog has a couple pages of potatoes. Now some potatoes are purple and they're purple all the way through. They take longer to digest, but they have more antioxidants. They're good for your blood sugar and blood pressure. Like I mentioned earlier, my neighbor grows potatoes that are blue on the outside, they're white on the inside. I asked what kind. He said, I don't know. Somebody gave me seed years ago. But he said I can plant them. And he said there's no potato bugs on them. If I put Kennebec or some of the other varieties alongside, the potato bugs just cover them, eat them. So this is one variety I would certainly look into growing that would not, you don't have to worry about the potato bugs so much. Because potato bugs, either you got to put poison on it or you got to stand there day after day picking bugs off. They will eat potatoes. They love eggplant too, and even tomatoes. We'll talk more about pests and pest control. Now, if you want to start your seeds indoors, we don't start too much seeds indoors ourselves. We're too busy. We go to the nursery, these in the spring and get our seeds. But if you want to plant indoors, you got to start onions late January, so they're big enough. The hairs are big enough to plant by May. Now, there's different kinds of onions. There's sweet Spanish onions. There are yellow sweet Spanish onions. There's yellow onions and white onions. The white onions are usually very sweet. They don't keep very well. They get big, but they don't keep well. My experience is the hotter the onion, the better it keeps. Now, the red onions, lots of them are good to eat, and they keep very well. Some of them are quite sweet, and they keep quite well. So we grow a lot of red onions as well as white onions, and there's Bermuda onions, which are white and sweet also. Plant your onions 4 inches apart. They get a big bulb, and they take room. But they don't spread out. You can put your rows fairly close together. We'll talk about that later. Tomatoes and ground cherries and peppers, if you want to start these indoors, you got to start them late February so they're ready to plant when the frost is done in the spring. Sweet potatoes, Phyllis will be demonstrating how you have to prepare a sweet potato in the second half. Sweet potatoes, you not plant the potato in the ground. It won't grow. Nothing happens. Sweet potatoes, you got to get a potato and put it in a glass of water, and it will grow shoots out. And you bring the shoots, get a couple of leaves on, you take them out, put them in water or soil, and they'll grow roots on it, and that's what you plant. They plant these sprouts in the ground after the danger of frost. We grow sweet potatoes, and sweet potatoes are interesting when you pick them. They hang on a vine like grapes, and when you pick them, sometimes they come out 8 or 10 sweet potatoes all at once. Sweet potatoes are a little bit tricky to keep. We're still trying to fathom how to keep them other than freeze them. But actually the ones they say you're supposed to not clean them when you take them out. Don't clean them. Wrap them in newspaper and put them in a place where it's 80 degrees for 2 weeks. And then you can take them out of the newspaper and clean them, and they're supposed to stay that way. They do stay better that way than just putting them in the fridge, I know that. But that's what they say. But we often cut them up and freeze them. We eat all we can fresh. We like them that way. Swiss chard, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, kale, collards. You can start these indoors. You had a little bit sooner. We never do. We just start ours in the garden. As you'll see later on today, we're already getting broccoli, cabbage. I got a cabbage there today. The kale is ready. Our Swiss chard is up 30 inches now. It's up like that. I got some leaves I'll show you. And it was not started indoors. If you have a greenhouse, I'll mention that later, it will give you a longer growing season. Here, but we got to start from scratch now. If you have sod like this, like I said earlier, you're going to have to get somebody with a plow. Either a plow that will turn it over, and now I know I don't see, is Mel here today? Someplace maybe. He's going to show you afterwards, but anyway, I know he's got a plow out there. He's got a disc too. Ask him to show it to you. Now the farmers, sometimes they use a disc plow, and a disc plow is very, very good. But most of the farmers' equipment is too big for your garden. I got a 2-furrow plow. Mel's got a 3-furrow plow, but I got a 2-furrow plow, and I plow my garden in 45 minutes every spring. Doesn't take long, but I don't have sod in the garden either. And then you have to disc it, and you take your cultivator and you cultivate it and disc it. And if you happen to have a big tractor, farmer, sometimes they have a big tiller that goes behind the tractor, like a farm tractor. They do an excellent job. But like I said, and we go over. I keep going over right till we plant it. In fact, I plant usually onions or something down the side so I can keep, or in the middle, so I can go down and keep working the land until we put in a main planting, the 24th of May. Basically, we get a load of cow manure put on every year. It's very old stuff, and I plow that in even before it rains on it. It gives you more nutrients, and I think the vegetables maybe are sweeter, but you really got to prepare the land before you plant it. Now there is other ways you can build up your land. I'll talk about that shortly. Here I am. This is just taken this week. I got a tiller. It's 16 inches wide, but I plant my rows 29 inches wide. Strawberries, I plant them 58 inches wide because they spread out a lot. Right now we got tomato plants and string beans, bush beans that we plant at 59 inches apart, and you can hardly walk between the row. This tiller now on your right, that's our strawberries for next year, and on the left, that's the weeds. And on the extreme left, that is broccoli, where I just picked this morning, some of it. You will, right now there's no weeds there. I tilled that all in the other day, and it was hot and dry, and the weeds are dead now, till they come up again. But when you buy a tiller, try to get a real tiller that has the tangs behind the wheels. You can get small ones, narrow ones, but I like this one. I had one before with 16 inch, had no reverse. Make sure you get a reverse in it. It's very handy. This is an earthquake, but there's other makes that are very good. It cost me $700. They had them on sale. One I had before did 40 years, but it was wore out. And here we are with our rows. Like I said, I'm planting mine 29 inches apart. You might want it more. Like I said, for strawberries, I plant them 58 inches apart. You can, but some stuff doesn't spread, like onions and that. They grow fairly up, straight up. Now, if you want to build up your soil without artificial fertilizer, you can plant soybeans and then plow them in, work them in. My parents grew strawberries commercially when I was growing up for several years, probably about 12 years. And they put in 6,000 plants every year. They got new plants from the nursery every year. And they put them in. Now, we plowed them in. Once the crop came off mid-July, we plowed them in, worked up the land, and my dad broadcast soybeans over it. And by September, they'd be up about 1.5 feet. And then we plow them in. And we give that field back to the farmer after 5 years. You can see it for several years after that. You can see a line right down the field where we had plowed those soybeans. The grain be 1.5 feet higher. The corn be about 3 feet higher. The only thing he said he didn't like about it, it got so high when you got a windstorm that everything blew down flat. It was hard to harvest. But it sure enriched the soil. You got to get nitrogen back somehow. Now, where we live, I rent the farm to a farmer, and I had rented to another farmer years ago, and he grew a lot of corn, and the soil was run down a lot. And he got the soil tested and needed lime, so he brought in a whole transport load of lime. I mean tons of it, and he put it on, and it must have been what it needed, because the clover this year, he planted clover, and the clover was up to here this year. It was up to my waist before it blew down flat. Years ago that would have been a problem, because with the hay binds they had a sickle, but he's got a disc bind. And now disc bind works very good for a farmer as long as there's no stones. But that clover was very heavy, and it cut with 115 horsepower, 120 horsepower. They made that tractor work, though. He said he put it down two gears, but it made it work. But he harvested all right. But that clover, the second crop now, was up like that, all in bloom now. So he put the right stuff in the soil. He got a good crop. So I'm not saying that it isn't bad to test your soil. I never really got our soil tested because it grows good. We know what's in it. But at the same time, more important testing the soil is working your soil well and keeping the weeds out of it. The time you plant the seeds, you got to have the ground warm enough. For germination, it's got to be wet enough to germinate. I've seen us put seeds in the summertime and they never germinate till we got a shower because it was too dry. If it's too wet and too cold, the seeds will rot. They will not germinate. So it's very crucial you get in at the right time. Phyllis and I, we usually put our seeds in about the 24th of May. And sometimes we can go earlier. This year I put corn in, we'll see later at the 15th of May. Didn't freeze after that. But 10 years ago we got a frost. No, 9 years ago this year. We got a frost 20th of May, -3. And anything was above the ground froze. Asparagus. This is some asparagus in our asparagus patch, maybe. Just from our asparagus patch. This is not, but anyway, the asparagus patch we got now, my mother planted it in about 1957. That's 67 years ago. And it's still doing well. I put more dirt on it. We got it deep. I take a light till. I take the tiller and I set it very lightly. In the spring, as soon as the snow goes off, I go over it 3 or 4 times to knock the weeds off the top. Now the asparagus will come up late April, May, June. Now, you want to harvest asparagus to the end of June. Quit cutting it then. Now, our asparagus is very old. Phyllis was very surprised when she married me that asparagus wasn't all the same size and the same length like you buy it in the store. Like we have asparagus, some of it's an inch around there because it's old. It comes up and it's really good. But if you keep cutting it all summer, you will kill it after a while. So we only cut at the end of June, and you'll see in the next picture, you see what it looks like now? That's 5 weeks since we quit cutting at the end of June, and it's this high now. And it'll stay that way till it freezes. When it freezes, it'll turn yellow. I'll discuss that a little bit later, what we do with it. By the way, how many like asparagus? You like asparagus? Oh, people like asparagus. That's good. The first planting you do in the spring, June-bearing strawberries. Now, a lot of people, some of them like ever-bearing strawberries. But my experience, if you put ever-bearing strawberries out in your garden, probably all you're going to do is feed the animals. Because you get a strawberry now and again. If you got it indoors or you got it someplace, but outdoors, they come now and again. I figure we probably lose about 10% of our strawberries to the animals or to rot or something or something. So so we go to June-bearing, and that was the kind my parents grew. They put in 6,000 plants every year, and they put them in the last week of April. I've seen them put them in blinding snowstorms. When they get a snow flurry come through, strawberries don't mind cold weather. One time we left the 20th of April for our holidays, and I put the plants in before we left. In fact, we had an inch of snow that night. I dug the plants out, put them in the ground. When they come back, every plant was good. They don't mind the cold weather. What we do with ours, you can see these plants here. That's this year's ones. You can see the way they're running already. We take the plants off of the last year's crop. We don't buy new plants every year ourselves. We just take them off, not the mother plant, but the outside one. We take a plant. I gave 50 away to another man this year, and I took 55 myself. And we still got 64 quarts off about 50-some plants. You can depend on getting 1 quart per plant the next year. There's one thing though. When you put that plant in, we got some plants I'll be showing you later. It's just one little plant. Do not take one berry off it this year when you plant it. Cut all the blossoms off because they won't make runners. And Phyllis said the other day she was weeding the strawberries. She wanted one had no runners, and here we missed one blossom and had a berry on it. You got to cut all the berries, all the blossoms. No berries the first year in that plant. You'll get 5 or 6 berries the first year. You cut all the blossoms. You get no berries. The next year you get 100 berries. Oh yeah, the thing instead of from the runner, the runner, they'll make runners because if you don't cut the blossoms, it doesn't make runners. And I've said this before. One man I thought had it. He never got it this year. He come up and saw it. Oh, he said, I really understand now. I said to him, how are your plants doing? Yes, he said, they got runners. He never had runners before. Because that is very, very important. And people keep strawberries over a second year. You'll get a 50% crop the second year and a 25% crop the third year. So I recommend put plants in every year. It does take room. When my parents grew strawberries commercially, the last year we grew strawberries, the last 2 years, the only time they kept plants over, we weren't going to plant them again, and we usually got about 6,200 quarts to an acre, which was 6,000 plants. They would plant 1,500 plants a day, the two of them. I'll demonstrate how you plant them later on. But when they we kept the last one over. We got 9,300. There was a picture that one. Those days we got pickers. People come and pick so much a box. We sold strawberries 35 cents a quart, 3 quarts for $1, $4 a dozen. Already picked. But we picked it on the 1st of July. We used to tell people, because the stores were closed, come and get your berries then. So we picked berries Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. But this one year, usually our biggest picking was about this. One year we picked 175 dozen quarts. That's 2,100 quarts in one day. The pickers started in a row from here to Mouse Garden at 4:45 in the morning. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they picked one row. But everybody came. I sold 155 dozen quarts there. We saved 20 dozen for one store you wanted the next day. But people just kept coming and kept selling berries. So they will produce if you do it right. Now they only bear for about 3 weeks. You get a few berries at the start and a few berries at the end. You get usually about 3 big pickings in the center. Now this year we got 64 quarts. We put in about 50-some plants, and we had one picking 4 quarts, 1 8 quarts, 1 11 quarts, 1 12 quarts, 1 13 quarts, and then went down again. So that's the way strawberries are. You can pick them when they're wet too. They're not like raspberries. But all fruit will deteriorate fast, so freeze them right away or eat them right away. And the other thing about strawberries, in the fall, cover them with straw, marsh hay or straw or something. Now I was going to tell you about the asparagus. You saw the asparagus, how it's tall? When it turns yellow in the fall, I take the side, I cut it off. I put it on top of the strawberries. Then the corn stalks are dry, but then I put the corn stalks on top of that so they don't blow away. And that makes an ideal covering. And I leave that covering on till late April. I don't take it off till I have to get new plants in the spring. And the reason I do that, because it retards the blossoms. The berry plants don't come on as fast, and you don't get you don't get that late frost on the blossoms, because you get a frost on the strawberry blossom when it's late. You'll get little wee berries and hard centers, very, very seedy. Now, if you do get a hard frost, like I said 9 years ago with that one -3, and they're right out in blossom, I put the water to it. Here, the irrigation system, I put the water to it, and there was a 1/4 inch ice on those blossoms in the morning, but it did not hurt the blossoms. So that is a way that you can get around that if they happen to be out. But this year we had beautiful strawberries. We had no frost on our blossoms, so that was good. Yeah. And that's the problem. Yeah, they might, but the problem is you got so much weeds in that. It's just not a. Well, it might. I don't know. You pick the front. We can tell you. I don't know how you'll find out there, because it's best just to pick them first thing when they come out. I don't even try to keep them. Yeah. You cut the flowers off the stem. They'll have 3 or 4. Often they have 3 or 4 blossoms on the stem. Cut the whole stem off. Then they make runners. A lot of people don't understand that, but that you have to. I know they don't want to waste those few berries, but it's well worth it. Instead of getting Instead of having a few berries, the next year you have lots of them. You get a quarter. We're actually doing a little bit better than a quarter plant usually. One year I put in about 70 plants and 98 quarts off of it or something. But if you do it right, you should get a good harvest of berries. Also, the last week of April, we put in some onions, radish, lettuce, and peas. I usually put in bunching onions, or what I call multiplier onions at this time. I don't put in my main crop onions then. For one thing, I like to work the soil some more. Sometimes it's hard to get hairs and that from the nursery. Don't have them in yet. And you can get sets. They're little onions that you put in, little bulbs you put in. And yeah, the multiplier, well, I told him, yeah, we put that in. The bunching onions and multipliers, but when they get mature, you break them apart like a garlic, and you plant each one, and you'll get 4 or 5 onions from each one the next year. Radish, yeah, we eat them green. No, don't wait till they get hot, because they get hot, and you got to let them dry out then. All onions and garlic and that, when we pick them, we put them in a place where they can dry for a week or so before we put them away. We got an ideal place at our house. It's down underneath the porch where the sun can get all morning, and it's dry there, and they dry out. We spread them out so they can dry. Radish. We like to grow the French breakfast variety. They're long and slender, but there's other ones. There's round ones. They take a little bit less room than the round ones, and they're very good. Lettuce, there's many varieties of lettuce. I brought one head with me, one type. There's salad bowl and butter crunch are delicate varieties. Great legs, it's harsher to eat, but it grows harder. And romaine is dark in color. Usually we grow the romaine. Usually I bring big romaine heads here. This year we put in romaine seed. Whatever's wrong with the seed, not one seed came up. We do have failures sometimes. What happened to seed, I don't know. But anyway, it was probably older seed, but lots of time older seed works all right. But this year it didn't. That's all I can say. I can't say we always have success. Now lettuce, we transplant it. The first planting, we usually put a longer row in because we eat off of that too. We start eating at the end of May or early June because we have to eat the little leaves coming up. But as soon as they come up, we transplant it a foot apart so we get heads. So after that, we don't put in as much in the row because we're eating off the heads of the lettuce. And we do plant it every 2 weeks. Radish, peas, lettuce, we plant every 2 weeks. Right up to, well, the peas we grow up to mid-July. The lettuce to early August. I'm going to plant some now on Sunday. And the radish I'll go probably to the end of August. This time of the year you think it's warm. It's hot out here, but the plants do not grow like they do in the spring. We got an hour less daylight now, and by the end of August we'll have 2 hours less daylight. And the plant, even though it's hot, the plants don't seem to grow the same. It's just the way nature is. Peas, there's many different varieties of peas. There's Little Marvel, which are very sweet, but they're not very many. The straight arrow peas, there's many in the catalog. We like to grow Homesteader. They got their big pea that tastes good, they freeze well. And then there's snap peas. You can eat the fat pods with the peas, and the snow peas, they have flat pods, but almost no peas inside, but you eat them. We prefer to eat, we like our peas raw. We pick them and eat them raw as much as we can. What we can't eat that way, we cook with carrots. Peas and carrots are very good together. Here's the main crop that we planted. Well, some of this we started the 24th of May. Now you can see this is corn. In the picture, this first corn, that's this year's corn to the left. I planted the first 2 rows the 15th of May. The next 2 rows I planted a week later. The next 2 rows a week later. The last row, which is very small there, right now the last row is up to here. In the pictures, 6 inches. I planted that one the last week of June. I took a chance on it. I may not get corn off it, but I probably will. that way we'll have corn to eat. We started eating corn this past week. We have corn all of August and all of September, fresh corn right off the field. Now you can get many different varieties. We're growing Northern Super Sweet, which is a hybrid corn. It's got 12 rows on it. You can get peaches and cream. It's got a lot of rows too. It's a more delicate corn. I will say with the super sweet corn, you can put, when it's dead ripe, you can put it in the fridge for a week and it won't lose its taste. The only thing is when you're cooking it, if you take it off the field like we do half an hour before we eat it, boil it 4 minutes. If you got it in the fridge, boil it 6 minutes. You got it. It takes a little bit longer to cook them because it's cold. Yeah. You have one?
Do you have issues with squirrels?
No. But we do have issue with birds. Blackbirds, we've got to put nets over it some years. Yeah, but if you have a good cat, you get a live animal trap. We got a stray cat around this year, and I didn't have one chickmunk. And the chickmunks love strawberries. Usually, they come soon as the strawberries come, they come. But even Sister White says you got to do something with the animals. If the animals are in the woods, I leave them. But they come in my domain while I take care of them. And I mean take care of them, you kill them because they just keep coming back. Trees? Well, yeah, if you got a lot of trees around, the squirrels are there too. That's one thing. Now, one year we had a bad year for chickmunks. I killed 14 that year, but my neighbor across the road killed 114 that year. They dug holes all through his garden. Yeah, he really had a problem. The Lord was good to us. We only had 14. Now, this corn, you get smut on the corn. It's kind of like a black tumor. And you get corn borers. Actually, most of the seed you buy, if you keep your seed over with these hybrids, I'm not sure you're going to get true things. Some of them are not hybrids. But the seed I get every year, the seed is treated. Don't eat the seed. The seed is treated. So, and you don't get many corn borers. I don't have hardly any trouble with corn borers because they do treat the seed. And whatever they put in there, it keeps the corn borers out, which I like. When you harvest corn, you got to wait till the silk on the cobs kind of turns brown. This Northern Super Sweet, actually, you see the kernel start coming out at the end of the cob. That's when the blackbirds like to come and they'll start eating at the top of the cob and they'll peck it right down and eat the corn right off the cob. So we have to put nets. I haven't had to put a net up yet this year, but hopefully they won't come. They don't always come. And we'll demonstrate this planting seeds in hills. When you talk about a hill, instead of making a hill, you make a hole in the ground. And you put seeds in it. Right here are 7 pumpkin seeds. We just planted this a month or 2-3 weeks ago to have this picture. Actually, sometimes only 1 seed comes up, sometimes they all come up. And this particular one, only 3 seeds come up out of the 7. But that's normal. We plant different things in hills, like squash, pumpkin, cucumber, melons like cantaloupe, watermelon, honeydew, and then corn. My mother used to put corn in hills. I don't. I plant in rows, each kernel 4 inches apart. And I got the rows 29 inches apart. So it's up to you how you plant it, but we usually plant these things we plant in hills. And like the squash and the pumpkin, we'll talk about how much room they need pretty soon. Yeah, this is Hubbard squash here. And this is about this time of the year. These things, Hubbard squash, I usually put them at the end of the garden so they can over the fence or into the field or wherever they want to go because they'll take 20 feet in every direction. They just take a lot of room. You can grow acorn or butternut squash. They're winter squash. We like Hubbard. We often average with a Hubbard squash 25, 30 pounds. One was 52 pounds. But and you can leave it there till the frost kills the leaves. They'll take a little bit of frost. Now, one year we had a warm summer and the squash got big and they started to rot, so I had to harvest them then. The other thing we'll talk about that another time about pest control. It's interesting about these Hubbard squash. You get a very thick rind. People say they want a small squash when we want to give them a squash. But the bigger the squash, the sweeter it is, because the rind gets very, very thin. You get a lot of sun, it gets very sweet. Yeah, do you want a question? I was going to get the pest control later on. Yeah, yeah. Squashes, pumpkin, cucumber, cantaloupe, watermelon, corn if you want to. You can plant either way corn. But it's in the notes. If you want to send it, it's all on this sheet of notes. Yes, email to it. That's why. And you have all this. Summer squashes we go zucchini, but there is crookneck too. It's a yellow squash. I only put a couple hills in a zucchini because they produce. Now zucchini, you know what zucchini squash look like? They're green squash. Phyllis likes to eat them when they're small, but you can let them grow, and they will get 3 or 4 inches across, and they'll get 20 inches long like a baseball bat. But if you let them get like that, you can keep them for months that way. They'll stay. You can keep them for months and you can make. What do you make with that? Zucchini bread, or something like that. Yeah, you could. There's a way to use them. And did you know something about zucchini? You know it's got a nice flower on it. One day we were at a market, and here they were selling the flowers, very delicate, for about $10 a piece. We don't eat the flowers, but I guess it's a delicacy if you like the zucchini flowers. We're going over this again about beans, the pole beans. Like I said, you can put them against a wall on long sticks. They get a little bit tougher, and we got different varieties. Going over this sometimes several times. Sometimes it takes time for it to sink in. I know that from experience. I had men working for me, and my dad used to say, you tell a man 3 things, he only remembers the last thing. And some of them don't remember anything. I can remember I had 2 forklifts, and I used to put a man on a forklift. And I said, there's one maneuver you see my son and I do. I said, it's perfectly safe when you know what you're doing. But I said, don't try it. You're going to be in trouble. I said, when I think you got enough experience, I'll tell you. And more than once, they run about 2 weeks and they would try it, and they scare me half to death in themselves. Nobody ever got hurt at it, but it scared them bad because they weren't ready. I said, I told you when you're ready, when I think you got enough experience, I'll tell you. It was a perfectly safe maneuver when you knew what you were doing, but if you didn't know what you were doing, it was a very dangerous maneuver. And that is sometimes we have to read things, to do things more than once to learn it. Tomatoes. There's many different kinds of tomatoes. I like to put in some early girl or glamour or something that comes on early. We're starting to harvest the tomatoes now. We got 5 on the shelf. We ate one before, and there's 5 more ripening. I also grow beefsteak. I like the beefsteak, the big sweet tomato. But if we get a cold summer, they don't mature. They're going to mature this summer. But you got to put a cage up. You know what a tomato cage looks like? I should have brought one, but I didn't. It's a wire cage and I drive, as you can see in this picture, I drive stakes in so the cage won't fall over. Now, right now, those tomato plants are way up above the stakes. This was early in the season. And to the left of that tomato plants, you see bush beans. I left 59 inches between them, and you can hardly walk down between them now. They're so wide. And then there's cherry tomatoes. Don't plant your cherry tomatoes close to your big tomatoes because you will get cross-pollination. But the cherry tomatoes are nice. You don't even have to plant them every year. They just seem to come up from seed by themselves. But the year we got one plant by mistake, and I didn't curtail it, and it took a 10-foot circle. There was hundreds of tomatoes from one plant. So after that, I take the tiller. I just keep them so small. I don't want them all over the place. And then there's some yellow tomatoes. They're very good too. You can get big yellow tomatoes, but small yellow tomatoes, and they're very sweet. So you look in the catalog, you have to experiment, see what you like best. Swiss chard. We grow Swiss chard rather than spinach. We grew spinach some years, but the spinach is small. It has a tendency to go to seed, and it's harder to clean. The Swiss chard, like I said, we got leaves there. We'll show you there. They're up 2 feet now, and they'll stay there even after the frost. We'll keep harvesting. You just keep leaf, and they just keep growing more and more. We only put in about 6-foot row to start. We transplanted. We got 2 rows now at about 20 feet long. We grow 2 kinds of Swiss chard: red Swiss chard and green Swiss chard. So it's I got both kinds with me today. We'll show it to you. It's we just find it easier to grow than spinach, and I don't see much difference in the taste. And you can freeze it. Most of these vegetables you can freeze or can. I don't think you can can Swiss chard, but we freeze it. It freezes good. But yeah, but I'm talking about put in the freezer for the winter. And the beets. These are the cylinder rock beets. They don't take as much space. I got some here with me today. I'll show you. Cucumbers. These are pickling cucumbers here. They're fatter and shorter. We grow those, and the English cucumbers too. This is a nice white cauliflower. Doesn't it look nice and white there? You know what happened? It was planted too close to the broccoli. This is what you call cross-pollination. You got to leave, there's certain species you got to leave 25 or 30 feet between. And this thing cross-pollinated. We got some green cauliflower when it should have been nice and white. Another thing that you got to watch is Brussels sprouts near cabbage. The sprouts will not get, the sprouts are supposed to have round, firm heads. They'll get loose heads that they won't get firm and hard if they're close to the cabbage. And melons, you got to keep your watermelon and other melons away from the cucumbers. They will cross-pollinate. There's certain things that give space between even different type of melons. If you put watermelon and cantaloupe and not too close together, you will get a cross between them. And the squash, yeah, you got to. But there's other types of plants you can plant almost anywhere. Here's a list here. Carrots, beets, onions, turnip, parsnips, spinach, Swiss chard. You can plant them almost any place in the garden. They want to cross-pollinate with anything. And I like to rotate the garden. Every year I try to plant the stuff in a different spot in the garden. It helps keep the pests down. We're going to talk about pests a little bit later on. And it also, each one takes a lot of different nutrient. Corn always takes a lot out of the soil. So I try to rotate your corn, put it in different places. And successive planting, you can see here, this corn was planted every week. The last one was about 2 weeks. But that way we have, and I mentioned earlier about planting peas and that, yes? Yeah, it's all in this. If you send, yeah.
We'll email it to you if you just get a presenter's sheet. Our email address is on there. Sally has the sheet. Just let us know.
And she'll send it out to you. Yeah, and like I said before, peas, we can plant them every 2 weeks in the middle of July. If you plant them after, 1 year we planted them too late and the peas came out and the pods came out, but the frost got them before the peas came in the pod. It was kind of sad. lettuce and radish, like I said, we plant that to the end of July. Actually, I'm going to put lettuce and radish in even yet. But the radish uh, and the lettuce takes about 2 months, so it'll be frost. But the radish I'll put into probably the end of August. And if you plant your stuff when the soil is warm and when it's damp, I've seen us put seeds in the ground and it was dry and they never germinated till we got a shower on them. So you got to have the soil just right and worked well. But even in the summertime, I take the tiller and I till the land again before I plant the seeds. Transplanting. Here is a picture. I hope you can hear it through this speaker here. We got a couple of videos here. When you're transplanting, the main body, we thin it out though. We leave the main body where we take the plants from. We leave plants a foot apart, whatever we want. They're a little bit more advanced than the others usually than the ones you transplant. Don't throw them away. And sometimes we give the plants away. We got lost. If we don't have a lot, we just use what we need anyway. You got to realize you're going to lose some to the animals and some to nature, and plant enough. Plant like lettuce when it gets 3 or 4 inches high, then you transplant it. We got some here we'll show you later on. Put it a foot apart. They need space, and it's only at its peak to eat for 3 weeks, 4 weeks at the most. It goes to seed then. It makes heads, so you need some room between it. It's amazing too how fast it grows. Here's cabbage. We grow 3 different kinds of cabbage. I brought an early cabbage with me. It would get bigger, but it's ready to use now. We plant early green cabbage, late green cabbage, which are kind of Dutch cabbage, flat heads. They last a long time, and then we like the purple cabbage, the red cabbage. They're very high in antioxidants, good for your health. But they're a late cabbage. They don't mature too late. So this is what I got here today. I'll be showing you later is an early cabbage. Here's a young cabbage. You see it got big leaves on the outside. The head is just starting to form. We had one lady told us, she said, all my cabbage was making big leaves, so I ripped it out. She didn't realize if she waited a little while later, it would have made a head in the center. But they do make big leaves. Don't get discouraged. They make big leaves first. And broccoli, we transplant it the same way. When you transplant plants too, I'd like to transplant them in the evening when it's a little bit cooler. And as soon as you transplant them, put the water. I got watering cans. I water them in the evening. I water them in the morning. The next day when the sun come out, you'll see the plant droop right over, looking like it's dead. You're watering them in the evening. The next morning, they're upright again. They might do that 2 or 3 days, but don't worry, they will take a hold. But at night when the sun goes down, they will come up and they'll be standing up straight in the morning, but you see them wilt over till they get the roots right down again. But keep putting the water to them. It's very important that you keep putting the water. Of course, sometimes you can transplant when it's raining and when the soil is really wet. That's good too. You don't have to worry about germination when you're transplanting, so they like it wet. And this is a Swiss chard. This is a red Swiss chard that we transplanted. And like I said, we don't put many seeds in, but when you transplant it, you get a big row, and they just produce. And Swiss chard, you don't cut all the leaves off at once. You just cut one at a time, and they keep growing. Just keep producing. But they do need space. Plants like cauliflower are very tiny at first. Phil was just saying this morning, she said how big the cauliflower got. They're 2 feet high now. They're starting to curl. They'll curl. The leaves will curl before they make the head in there. One year I was throwing a different type of cauliflower, and I said to myself, I won't have any cauliflower this year. It was November. I went out, and there was one there 11 inches, and there was another 12 inches in November. Now we're going to talk about that, but I'll mention it right now. Anything like cauliflower, lettuce will take a lot of frost. It can freeze almost solid. If you leave it on the vine right where it is and let it thaw out naturally, if you wait till a warm day when it's thawed out with the sun and that, it's fine. You can harvest it then. You'll never know it was froze. But if you harvest it when it's frozen, it'll turn all watery. Yeah, nature has a way to take care of that. So you have to. And those 2 heads of cauliflower were beautiful. They were good heads. Mid November. The one we're growing now will mature long before that. The time of the transplanting is important because if you get the plants too big, it's harder for them to get it caught. If they're too small, it takes a long time to catch. So when they get a couple of leaves, 3 or 4 inches, that's the idea. The width of the rows, like I said earlier, the width of the rows for tomatoes. Like those beans you see to the left there was 59 inches there. And you can hardly walk between the rows now. The tomatoes are spread, the beans are spread. There's other things like onions, carrots, and that don't spread very much. Now it's very important to thin your vegetables like carrots, parsnips, beets. We'll show you a picture of what happens if you don't thin them. String beans and peas, in summertime you get a lot of dead leaves. The leaves would die underneath, or sometimes the bean will rot. Make sure you take all those dead leaves and beans out of there, because if you don't, it holds the moisture and they mold in there and it spreads. So yes, anything that's yellow doesn't look right, take it out of there. And the kohlrabi, which I brought a couple. I brought some that just the way it grows there. We planted a foot and a half apart because it got big leaves. You got to thin this stuff. Now here, later on, we'll show you again about the thinning. Now you got to keep the weeds down. A lot of people said we planted a garden, we got nothing but weeds out of it. Well, that's all you're going to get out of your garden if you don't weed it. There are different ways to weed your garden. Some people put a mulch, some people put newspaper, some people put plastic. Kind of amusing thing, when I was growing up, there was one lady, in those days, I lived in a farming community. They had 43 farmers ship milk to the local cheese factory then. But the ladies all grew gardens. There was a big thing to grew gardens those days. But they used to put Roundup on corn to kill the weeds. And she said to her husband, she says, why don't you just spray my garden with Roundup this year? She says, I won't have any weeds. And he was a loving husband, so he sprayed the garden with Roundup. Well, all they had that year, the garden was corn. They had no weeds though, but they had no vegetables either, because it killed everything. You could plant it the next year. Roundup only lasts 1 year, but so don't go that way. The mulch. I got my reservation with mulch because what happens, people put mulch on and the mulch doesn't deteriorate fast enough, yes, you'll have no weeds for a year or 2 or 3. You got to dig through it, put your plants in, but after a while the weeds will come through the mulch. The mulch hasn't deteriorated to become soil yet, and then you're in worse shape than you were before. But however you do it, whether you want to do it mulch or newspaper, whatever you want to do, you got to keep the weeds. We just till the weeds between the rows. I put them wide. Phyllis hoes them. I pull weeds. We both work on pulling weeds, and when the plants get bigger, like this time of the year, some places the weeds and the vegetables are big enough to just kind of fight it out. The onions will mature in another month, and when I pull them out and I till them, it isn't it's always something that you have to work at. Time your vacation too if you want food. I remember one time we went away in June. We come back, you couldn't see the garden for weeds. In fact, I tilled up a whole row of beets that year because I forgot they were there with the weeds. But the beets came up anyway. They weren't quite in the row like they had been, but most of them came up. This is a tiller, and it's one I paid $700 for. Like I said, it's Earthquake brand, but there's many good brands out there. Only thing I miss, the other one was smoking bad. Kept the mosquitoes away and the black flies. This one doesn't smoke at all. And you gotta take care of the weeds. Don't if you got a lot of rain, it's easier to pull the big weeds out. The ground is softer, you can pull them out. If you but if you want to kill the weeds, this year it's been hard to kill the weeds because it's rained so much. You till the weeds, but then they get reseeded. They don't die. If you get some dry weather and you can till it, they'll kill the weeds a lot better. And we got a hoe. We'll show you a hoe there. It's good for hoeing around the weeds too. If it's dry, soil is dry, like I said, it kills the weeds better. Somehow you got to keep the weeds down and out of your garden. And be sure your rows are far enough apart for tilling. Now you can get small tillers that are very narrow to go down between the rows. And if you get a tiller that has the tangs in the front, they're narrow, but they're hard to control, what I've seen of them. I like the rear tang one with a reverse in it. And we get barnyard manure, which tends to have a lot of weed seeds in it. Now, if you can get horse manure, the horse manure will heat. It doesn't have near many weed seeds in it, though. I don't know, when it goes through the horse, it seems to, maybe they digest the seeds better, I don't know. Holding up the plants. Now, you see here's a picture of our tomato plants of another year. You can see the stakes in there, but look at where the plants are, way up above the stakes. No stakes above that, so the plants are about that high in that picture. You can have fences, trellises, poles, sticks. I tried chicken wire one year for cucumbers. That's not a good idea. The cucumbers grew through the chicken wire, and you had to cut the cucumber in two to get it out of the chicken wire. So I don't recommend chicken wire for cucumbers. But some things, they'll grow up the wall and it will support it. Fall planting and spring harvesting. Garlic, you plant the garlic in the fall. In September, October, before the snow comes anyway. You separate the cloves, you plant it, and you put it about 2 inches in the ground and about 4 inches apart, and it comes up first thing in the spring. And when it gets up so high, they get curls on the top where the seeds form. Cut the curls off because you get bigger garlic. Now, I can't say that we always have a success with our garlic. This year, our garlic was not a very successful crop because it's the only year I've ever seen it. They actually got worms where they had too much wet weather. They actually got worms right in the garlic itself. And our neighbor who grows garlic commercially has 23,000 head last year. I asked the man that helps her. Well, he said she has many different kinds. He said some of the kinds only had 42% this year, while the other year, some of them didn't seem to touch. So even people that do it commercially, that grow garden all the time, there is times when we don't always have 100% success. We try for it, but we don't always have it. And here's garlic that is harvested. We grow porcelain type garlic, and the bulbs are larger. But there's many different varieties of garlic. How many here have eaten garlic? Have you eaten it raw? Pretty hot. Well, some of it's quite hot. But different kinds are a bit different. I remember my pardon? You can. Some people do use the curl and cook it. We don't, but you can use it. I know people do. My dad one time years ago, back in the 30s, when he was bachelor, he was putting garlic in his, I don't know, he was cooking or something, and a fellow was in there, and he said, "What's that?" He said, "Garlic." He said, "Give me a clove." So he took it, and he was kind of mean at the fellow, but he said, when I was at the Chinese restaurant, I slipped into a sandwich. He said, this young lady got this sandwich. She gave back and give the Chinaman an awful going over for putting that hot garlic in there. Don't do it. It was kind of mean at the fellow, but anyway, when you're not used to it, it kind of burns your mouth. Now, we eat garlic every day. Phyllis likes to cook it about half cooked, and I like it a little bit stronger than she does, but sometimes she doesn't get it cooked quite a bit, and I said, "Oh, it's good that way." But like garlic and onions and that, you got to dry it. Now, garlic, I got a spade there. You cannot pull it out of the ground. It gets deep rooted. You got to have a spade or a shovel. You got to actually break the ground up, because when it comes out with a big hunker. You can't believe the amount of dirt that comes out with a garlic bulb of garlic. It really gets rooted. Onions, you can usually pull them, but garlic, you cannot pull it. You just pull the top off. Now, parsnips. When you plant parsnips, you know what parsnip is? Yeah, it's like a white carrot, but it's bigger. We grow parsnips sometimes they're 3 or 4 inches across and 15 inches long. But when you plant parsnips, plant them in a row, but put a radish seed every 10 inches or so you know where the row is. Because by the time that the radish is ready to harvest, your parsnip is just coming up. You got to be careful when you're picking the radish that you don't pick up the parsnip seeds, plants, because they're just coming up then. And we do thin them out, transplant them so they're about a foot apart. Well, maybe not that, about a foot apart. Because they will intertwine themselves. Here's a picture of what happens if they're too close. You see that one on the left? The way it's twisted around, the seeds were too close together. And carrots will do the same thing. You'll get twisted small vegetables. Phyllis didn't like sowing. We first got married, she didn't understand that. She didn't like sowing the carrots way. Carrots do not transplant good. Parsnip does. But if you don't thin them, if you thin them, you get enough room, you get nice straight carrots. If you don't thin them, you might have like this parsnip all twisted around and small. It looks like a waste, but it isn't a waste. And parsnip is the one thing we leave in the ground all winter. They're a lot sweeter in the spring. And as soon as the frost goes in the spring, just as soon as I could get in there in mid-March, as soon as the ground thawed out, I dug the parsnip. One year I left them in for a couple of weeks and they rotted in there. So as soon as the ground thaws out in the spring, I dig them. And they're nice and sweet in the spring. Much sweeter. Phyllis said, "Let's try one in the fall." We did, but it wasn't near as sweet. Now, the width of rows. Some plants you can plant fairly close together. Other ones, like sweet potatoes, you need sweet potatoes, squash. They run a long ways. This year we put sweet potatoes by onions. Now the onions will be harvested in a month or so, but the sweet potatoes are going through it. Now you can take the runners and train them. Same with strawberries. We try to train the runners in the strawberries to keep your row within about 30 inches. One year we didn't do that, and the row was 8 feet apart, and we couldn't pick the things, and the weeds got in, and we lost a lot of berries, and they got wet, so we had a lot of them rot. that year. We still got a lot of berries, so we try to keep the plants more or less where we want them. But after a while, you just give up and let them go when the season gets big enough and you got enough room for them. And here's strawberries. Now you see this main row right down the center. That's the one we harvested this year. We got 64 quarts of berries off of that main row. You see the row on the right? That's the one that we planted for next year. That was the plants, and you can see they're already starting to run. I had them a little bit closer there because that main row, I've already tilled it in. There's nothing but dirt there now. And squash and melons, you need a lot of room for them. This squash here you see in the picture will be covering 3 times that. Sometimes they grow right over the fence. I plant them 15, 20 feet from the fence, and they'll grow over the fence. I've seen squash hanging from the fence sometimes. This is Hubbard squash. There's other winter squash too. You can grow butternut, acorn. We like the Hubbard squash ourselves. And when we cook it, the Hubbard squash, you know what Hubbard squash is like? Oh, they get big. We grew 152 pounds. We're averaging 30 pounds. They're about like that, 30 pounds. But they got a real hard skin on them. The best way to cook them, you get a handsaw, a carpenter's handsaw, and I cut them. I cut them endways. We turn them in the oven. We got a wood range. We put them in there 3 or 4 hours. And I leave the seeds in, unless you want to save the seeds for planting. Leave the seeds in so it doesn't damage the meat. Them big ones, you'll get about 2 or 3 inches, 2 inches of meat on it. And a lot of people say, give me a small squash. Well, the small squash is in there is good. The bigger the squash, the longer the sun's got it, and the sweeter it is. And the thinner that coat will be, that outside will be, but also the harder it will be. But we bake it in the oven, and then Phyllis, we eat what we can, and Phyllis scoops the rest out and puts it in bags and freezes it for the winter. Now squash will keep a certain time. They'll keep a month or 2 in the basement where it's cool. So you don't have to do it immediately. And like I said, when I harvest it, and I usually put it in a cool place. And what we don't keep, I give away. But we usually got a couple months to do that. The summer squash, well, you can't, unless you grow zucchini. And then if you let the zucchini grow big and long, you can keep it too. It's the summer squash that we'll keep. Onions and garlic, they don't spread very much. Neither do carrots. And the beets, yeah, they'll spread out, but they're not like that. They don't have runners. They won't spread like some of the other stuff. So a little bit of experiment how far apart you put your rows. One interesting thing about string beans, don't pick them when they're wet. When it's wet, because the beans that are left will rust. You got to pick your beans when they're dry. Onions, you can pick them green when they're small, but you can leave them big to get big when you harvest them, and you got to let them dry for a few days someplace before you put them inside for the winter. Like I said, red onions, we've kept them right through till we had fresh onions the next year sometimes. The big white onions, they go bad quickly, so I eat them fast. Phyllis says I like onions like you do a candy, an onion a day. I like my onions. Yes. I don't myself. Some people do. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I never bend them over. They just bend over naturally when they get up. That's my own opinion about it. So, but I pick them when I see when they quit growing. I go through and pick them and harvest them. So I don't harvest them all at once because some still go. With that? Oh, the seed. Yeah, you don't let them go to seed. But very few of the onions go to seed. Stuff like parsley. We had parsley survive one winter. It was a mild winter, but the parsley all went to seed the next year. You have some stuff will seed the second year that don't seed the first year when it comes up again. So we always put parsley in every year anyway. Multiplier onions or bunching onions. Here's some here that when they get mature, I picked and let them dry, and then you break the clove apart in the spring, and you plant each clove like a piece of garlic, and it makes more multiplier onions. You eat them green, but they do get really hot later on. But they come up early in the spring. So we keep some for seed every year. And the garlic, like I said, you pick it when it's mature, when the tops dry off a bit. And then there's something like tomatoes. You know when to pick your tomato, when it's red or when it's yellow, when it's ripe. Sometimes you like to pick it a little bit under, let it finish ripening inside. Sometimes the birds, I know robins will like to peck in the tomatoes sometimes. But pick it when you think it's best, because you can tell when it's ripe. Green beans, you pick them when they get big. The yellow beans, like I said, when they get yellow. Purple beans. This is kohlrabi. You can see the way it grows with like a porcupine. We start harvesting them and eating them when they're 1 inch big, because they all come on at once. Right now, the ones I got today are probably about 2.5 inches. We'll show you how to prepare it. They're very good, though. Cauliflower. Cauliflower, when it's making a head, when you see the little head coming where it's white, you got to tie the leaves over the top, because if you get sun on your cauliflower, it will ruin it. It's the same thing I didn't mention with potatoes. With potatoes, you got to hill the potatoes too. That is, you got to keep the potatoes covered, because if the sun gets on your potatoes, they'll turn green, and that is poisonous, and it isn't good for you. So you got to keep the potatoes covered. Sweet potatoes, you don't have to worry about that. Sweet potatoes grow in and under the ground. But your normal potatoes, you got to hill them. And the cauliflower, you got to tie the leaves over to keep the sun off of them. Parsley and basil. Now parsley we keep all summer. Basil, Phyllis just harvested our basil. It was ready to harvest. And you want to keep it for the winter. She put it on trays and she's drying it now, so we have it in the winter time. Any kind of herb you can dry. But the parsley, you can harvest it right on to after the frost comes. Now these root vegetables like carrots and beets, my parents used to put them in sand and keep them all winter in the basement where it's just above freezing. Phyllis decided she didn't like beets that way. She wanted them already prepared, and she didn't want big beets. So she picks her beets when they're about the size she wants now and puts them in a big pot, and cooks them and peels them and puts them through the food processor and puts them in the bag in the freezer. So we want beets in the wintertime. We don't have to dig them out of the sand. But the carrots, we still keep them in the sand all winter, and they keep almost like fresh in that sand. You pick them out, and they'll stay to May or June the next year anyway. Fine? The sand's in the basement. Yeah, I put it in barrels. Get sand someplace, put it in barrels, and put it in the basement. Yeah, sand like beach sand. Yeah, and make sure your sand is fairly dry. If the sand is wet, then they have more tendency to rot. If you have dry sand, they like dry sand to be in. Well, our basement, I just keep it about freezing in the wintertime, but most of your basements aren't that. I will say about beets too. I mentioned that about cooking beets. You can eat the beet tops. How many ate beet tops here? Yeah. But when you cook your beets, when you cut that stem off, cut it 1 inch above the beet. Because if you cut it right with the beet tends to bleed a lot when you're boiling it. You cut it 1 inch above that stem, 1 inch above the beet, it doesn't bleed near as much then. But the carrots and the beets that we leave in the garden, I never harvest them to the last week of October. And they do well there. Turnip too, you can leave it out a long time. And cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, kale, Swiss chard, even lettuce, they'll take some frost. But like I said, just don't harvest it when it's froze. Make sure that it's thawed out when you harvest it, because it won't go watery then. Broccoli. harvest it when the heads are good. Sometimes the heads, if you wait too long, they go to flower like this. You can eat the flowers, but normally you like to get broccoli when it's nice green heads. Broccoli, you got to be careful of the protein in it. Green worms. It looks just like the broccoli. It's hard to find. Soak your broccoli in salt water for a while, and the worms will float out. But you still got to watch it. But broccoli is good for you. Hubbard squash and pumpkins. I don't know whether we planted any pumpkins last year, but some come up by themselves. In fact, they spread right out in the farmer's field. He went around them with his, when he was cutting the grain. I said, I didn't plant them. You could have harvested them too, but he didn't. We had some nice pumpkins, but anyway, we harvest them. They'll take a little bit of frost, but when the leaves die off with the frost, you might better get them in because they won't grow anymore. And if it's too hot, they will rot. Harvest them then. But I always harvest them before a hard frost. Watermelon, I usually leave my watermelon to mid-September. Even though some people know how to tap it, and you can tell by the tapping of it whether it's ready to harvest or not. I'm not good at that. If I wait till mid-September, they're usually ready then, and I harvest my watermelon then. Pest control. You see this little animal? Have you ever seen it on your tomato plant? You get size of my thumb and about twice as long. And they got nice horns on it. They're what they call a tomato worm. And when you step on them, they make quite a squash. Actually, one lady said, I never had any this year, and I got 5. Actually, I found one on my tomato plant the other day, and it was just a little wee thing I hadn't eaten. One of these things will strip half a plant in a day. They're very destructive. Don't have any mercy on them. If you want tomatoes. Here's another thing you don't want to have any mercy on. This is what you call a cutworm. They're a fat white worm. If you see your plant dying off and you don't know what's wrong with it, dig around where the root should be, and you probably find a cutworm there. Just cut the root off. Now, one year my parents grew strawberries commercially. They put in 6,000 plants. We usually got 6,200 quarts. One year they lost 4,000 plants to the cutworm. They only got 2,200 quarts that year. And it was just a bad year for cutworms. But if you see a cutworm, even when you're tilling, or you see it even when something else, you ever see a cutworm, even if it isn't at the plant, kill it. Because they are destructive. Now, how many of you have trouble with raccoons or deers? Yeah. Here's an electric fence. This isn't mine. I'll show you mine in a little while. The kind of fence I have, but electric fence. Actually, I got electric fences this high. The deer will not jump over it. They could. I don't tell them they could. But the deer usually come with their head down. And when they hit that at the back of the head, I come out in the morning. If I see the stakes bent in at both ends, I know a deer hit that wire because it'll jump up and bend the stakes in at the end. And one time the insulator I found a week later on the other side of the garden. They leave then. I'll tell you about my fence in a minute. Normally you can turn your fence off during the day. Now we're away this today, so I put my fences on before I left because we do have deer around there. So you just have to control the animals somehow. Here. Oh, I got the fence around the whole garden for the deer. I'll show you what I got for the corn there. I got a separate fence too for the corn, but the whole garden for the deer. I don't have too much trouble with wood trucks, although I have got the odd one, and I take care of them otherwise. You trap them, and then they die of lead poisoning. I know it's kind of cruel in a raccoon the same way. The raccoon will look at you very pitiful, but I don't have too much mercy on them because they'll come back and eat all your corn. I don't usually have to take care of them that way because the electric fence keeps them out. But I had one raccoon one year. It got smart. It laid in the barn next to it all night, and in the daytime when I shut off the fence, it came in and started eating my corn. But it lost its appetite when it got some lead poisoning. But I know people from the city don't understand that, but the animals, you just, if you don't do something with them, and once they get a taste for that kind of food, they'll keep coming back. If they don't come to your garden, they go to somebody else's. These are potato bugs. And potato bugs love different things than potatoes. They will come on tomatoes. Not bad though. Eggplant. They'll just eat eggplant. They just love eggplant. We tried growing eggplant several years, but we just had too much trouble with the potato bugs. The only way unless you want to stand there and pick them all day, put poison on, but the poison is expensive. Yeah, they kind of eat the leaves, so you got to turn them over. And then there's another thing that comes out. Well, I think we'll show that later. Sometimes you got to put nets. I know one year we had to put nets over our strawberries. The birds were getting in. Normally, don't have to. Traps, you can get a live animal trap. You know the kind of. Now you get that live animal. There's two kinds of live animal traps out there. There's one that's both ends come down, and you put the bait in the center. They just got a trigger. They close very fast. There's another one that's kind of spring loader, and the way they make them, I won't have to be an elephant to trip them. I did take and I bent the thing so it come off easier. And actually, a friend of mine, I lent it to her. She actually caught a wood chuck in one. So, but I prefer the ones that flip very easy. I think they are sold at Timber Mart. Those ones that flip easy. And I washed the animals good, like the chipmunks. Put them in the 45 gallon drum of water in the trap and all, and when you got well washed, and you can bury them after that. You don't have any more problems. And sometimes you got to cover other things, like our corn. We've had several years where the blackbirds come and hit the corn, so we had to put nets right over the top of the corn, keep the blackbirds off of it. No, they're not crows. They're black. They're little black bird. And the whole flocks of them just land on it and they'll eat the corn at the top. This is what we call a striped cucumber beetle. And this beetle will get on. They get on squash too. I seen them get on Hubbard squash and eat right through that hard covering on the Hubbard squash. We got a can of Raid there. We'll show you later on. We spray that with Raid, and it seems to be very good. In fact, this can of Raid that we're going to show you, if you got ants even inside, they have different things. They're supposed to kill ants, you know, you ant killers. Never works like this Raid. When we go out, we can spray the tabletop or something 3 or 4 times the way you think the ants, and in a week the ants are all gone. It really works. You come back later on, the smell is gone. You can wipe off the table, and it's good. But it's much more effective than all these ant killers that they said that would kill ants. We've put out all kinds of ant traps and solution they're supposed to take, and it doesn't work like this. And these things also like roses. They'll just cover a rose bush and eat the nice flower up. Yeah. So don't have any mercy on these things either. Now, here's the kind of fence I got. You see there's a top wire here. That top wire goes all the way around the garden. Both gardens. And it's only about that high. And it will keep the deer out. They could jump over it, but they don't, because they come with their head down and they'll hit it with the back of the neck. And I said, see these 3 bottom wires here? One's about that high, one that high, that's for the raccoons. Squirrels, that's a different thing. You're going to have to experiment. Get a live animal trap. Get a live animal trap or another trap where the squirrel likes a nut. Put a walnut or something in there, or butternut or something. You might have to. What I found with that, sometimes with a squirrel, the nut, they could drill a hole through it, drill a hole through the pad of your thing, and wire it right to the trigger, so they can't get the nut off without tripping it, eh? Yeah. So that's the raccoon. Now, I'm going to talk about electric fence. You can go out and buy electric fence. get a good one, it's $300 or $400, I guess. Some of them are solar powered, but they told me after 3 or 4 days of cloud, they don't always work so good. What I got on mine for power, I got one of them, I got a high energy ignition system off of a GM vehicle. On this fence, it'll jump a spark about 1/8 of an inch, a blue spark. So when the animals, when the raccoon's wet nose hits one of those wires, it loses its appetite for corn. And the deer the same way. The other one, I got a 6-cylinder ignition system on. But with the ignition system, you got to have electric motor with some way to. I running one through with a belt reduction. The other one I got through a corner gear. You got to have a battery and a charger. But they work very effective, I will say that. Sometimes with electric fence, the raccoons will go through it because they don't. The electric fence are for cattle and horses and that, and the pulse is too long between the pulses, and the animals will actually jump through it. Mine runs fast, so they don't have time to get through between the pulse. They get that jolt. Now there's some foods that come up by themselves every year. We have strawberry rhubarb at our place. It's a little bit sweeter, and it comes up every year. And it was up like that this year. We had long stems on it. Do not eat the leaves of the rhubarb. The leaves of the rhubarb are poisonous, but the stems are wonderful. Egyptian onions, you can plant them in the fall. They grow tiny bulbs on the top of the onions with seeds in them. And you plant them, but they get very hot. We did grow them for a while, but we prefer not to. Asparagus, plant them fairly deep. It takes 2 or 3 years before you get much. In the first few years you have to be careful how much you harvest because you got to give them time to get settled. And you only harvest them, like I said, to the end of June. Don't cut them after the end of June. You'll kill them if you keep cutting them all summer. You can weed it if you want to. I always get a lot of weeds in, but it doesn't seem to hurt them that much. This year, they got very weedy and the weeds got up high. So twice we cut all the asparagus we could. I took the lawnmower, I went through and I mowed it right down again. Then we could see the asparagus for another couple of weeks before I did it again. And then at the end you can see it didn't seem to hurt it. You see the asparagus the way it was in the picture. It was 4 feet high now. It's nice if you have time to weed the thing, but we just don't have that kind of time. And asparagus, you go to a place where there was a house many years ago and it's not there, asparagus will still be there. You see asparagus, rhubarb, and lilac bushes. They just last for years. I can take you back where there was a house long before my time, still lilac bushes there. And Jerusalem artichokes, you know what they are? They grow, when you get them, you can't get rid of them. We tried them one year, but we got rid of them because in a time of trouble, grow them. And I'm going to tell you, too, about these weeds we take out. A lot of these weeds, people like to eat them. A lot of the weeds are good to eat. I prefer the vegetables. I tell people I'm going to eat my vegetables now. In the time of trouble, I'll eat the weeds. But yeah, in fact, sometimes we got a lady at Bancroft, she likes the weeds. Sometimes we take her a bunch of what do you call it? Callaloo, pigweed when it's young, eh? And yeah, there's nothing. And Nebuchadnezzar, he ate grass like an ox for 7 years, and he seemed to be none the worse for the wear. In fact, after that, he extolled God after that. The growing season, where we live, we have, probably in Bellevue, probably got 2 weeks more growing season than where we live. Even in Prince Edward County, got a little bit more. Bancroft probably gets 2 weeks less. And it's just, but it does vary from year to year. And if you live right in the village, like in Madoc or Bancroft, you get a little bit longer growing season right in the village. It doesn't freeze quite as quick as you do in the country. Now, you might want to extend your growing season. You can get a greenhouse. In fact, you can buy greenhouses from Princess Auto. I see them out on sale in the spring for 6 by 8 or something. But you can build a big greenhouse too. Now, when you're building a greenhouse, I know 2 different people. One didn't have it down well enough and the wind blew it away. And the other one didn't have enough to support the snow and the snow collapsed it. So these things you got to kind of take into consideration when you're making greenhouse, that it will take the wind and the snow. Now they do make greenhouses out there like A-frame. You have one greenhouse and then you put another one over top of it. You leave an airspace, two layers of plastic, like an airspace between the two. And I never had one, but they tell me it can be minus 15 outside and plus 15 inside when the sun is shining. Yeah, of course, when the sun goes down and the sun is short in the winter. Like our friend Les McClare had a greenhouse one winter and he kept it going all winter and he didn't let it freeze. But the stuff didn't grow very good. He didn't put any grow lamps in there. With the sunshine, lack of sunshine, they don't grow well. And like I said earlier, even though the plants at this time of the year, you plant plants that they don't grow near as fast as they do in May and June when they got more sunlight. And like in August, we'll lose pretty near an hour and a half of sunlight from the beginning of August to the end. And the plants seem to go by how much sun they get. And if you want to do something else, you know what a hotbed is? A hotbed is a box. My mother had them. You just make a box about 2 feet wide, 8 feet long or that. You put glass over it. If you can get horse manure, mix it in the soil because the horse manure will heat. And what you do, you plant your plants in there. In the daytime, you open up the glass. Now, our neighbor grows vegetable commercially, and she has glass that she can open up over her rows. You open up the daytime, at night you close it so it doesn't freeze. Now, that won't take a heavy frost, but it will lengthen your season by 2 or 3 weeks. The greenhouse might lengthen by a couple months. So there is ways to lengthen your growing season. This here, if you want to write that down, I think you can see it. And it will be on your email. It's this seed catalog here. If you go on the computer and you put in seed catalogs, you'll probably get many different seed catalogs to come up. But this is the one that we get our seeds from. It says someplace no GMO in it. And the broccoli there, you'll see a number 260. Broccoli blue wind. That's the kind we're growing. That's what we have here today. And the cauliflower is called number 455, called Majestic. They have many different kinds in there, but I'm just saying that I've tried different ones, and this is the one we had the most success with. I'll leave that up. Any questions now? I think we got, a few minutes yet? 15 minutes. Oh, here, yeah, go ahead. I don't know. You see them little white butterflies, little thing. That's the ones that lay the eggs. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't put anything on my cabbage for years, but yeah. You got anything to say about that, Phyllis?
A friend of ours, what she does is she has one of these nets you catch butterflies with. Yes, and like about a month ago is when these little things started coming. You see the little white ones. And you just can catch them and destroy those, and then they can't leave their larvae, So that's what she does. And I bought one, but I don't bother with it. I'm so busy with everything else, I don't do it. But yeah, here's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
For strawberries, I find that they're invasive and they have legs. So how do you find your strawberries in other parts of your garden that you did not put them, or they stay put?
Oh, they just stay put. Yeah, they want spread to other parts of the garden.
We find that birds will poop them out, the seeds out, and they plant flowers different places. We found them. We didn't put them there.
Actually, what they call, sometimes you got to till in good plants because what they call a weed is a plant out of place. So, but with plants that come up, sometimes plants like our dill, we never plant dill that comes up by itself every year. And there's tomato plants that come up by themselves when we transplant them because we get late tomatoes from them. But some plants, if we don't want them, even though they're good plants, we till them in because we got other plants. You just can't let them grow wherever they want to. Yes.
What about leaf miners? Do you have any recommendations? The ones that come on your Swiss chard, or there's something that's in our collards, and we can't figure out what it is because we don't see anything, but it makes holes in the leaves for the collards.
The slugs come on and they make holes. They just, there are commercial things you can get like sprays and powders to take care of slugs. What was that again? Okay.
You think
Some kind of earth. Dimation? Okay, so you could see Mrs. Gale.
it's surprising you don't see anything eating it, though. Yeah.
Okay, so she's saying that they crush, you have crushed shells, egg shells crushed, and then when the bugs crawl over it, they have soft bellies, yeah, and so they die that way. Japanese beetles, and they eat the roses, and they'll eat everything. The red can of Raid. There's two kinds of Raids for the bugs, and we'll show you this in the next hour.
Seems to be most effective. I don't know. I put in enough vegetables I can feed the bugs and everything else and have something left. But if you don't have a lot, they seem to really go out. If you only have a little bit, they seem to devour it all. Any more questions? Oh, yeah.
No. Actually, now Brussels sprouts will mature from the bottom up, and no, we don't pick the leaves off at all. You can buy the stalks with all the little balls on them. Buy a stalk like that from farmers and stuff. But we just pick ours and put them in the freezer. But oh, okay. Here's the thing. You're talking about harvesting them. Oh, absolutely. At the time of harvesting, you put your hand right close to the main stem and pick down, and the little ball will be on top and the leaf goes off. Absolutely. The leaf has to, yeah, but you do that from the bottom up because the top ones are tiny and the bottom ones are the ones you're going to. Okay, that is the way you buy them at farm markets. I was amazed because instead of them picking all the little balls off the Brussels sprouts, they just take the leaves off and then sell them that way. And that was a commercial picture we put on there because our Brussels sprouts are still pretty small.
But we have picked Brussels sprouts even. I think one year we picked some the 1st of January, didn't we? We often pick them in November, December. They'll still grow even when it's really late like that. When you're getting a lot of frost, when it thaws out, they'll keep growing. So they're very tough that way.
Be very sure that your Brussels sprouts are not planted next to your cabbage or collards. Collards are just the leaves out, but the Brussels sprouts have to be far from that so they don't cross pollinate. Well, that's when they're just coming up, the flower. You see the bees, and the butterflies, and that will take the pollen.
They don't know enough to stay at the one plant. They go from one plant to the other. They go from the cauliflower to the broccoli to the cabbage.
Y- Yeah. Okay, well, what happens is, yeah, I did it, and we had lovely looking Brussels sprouts, and they were nice and big, and they were soft. They were just tiny, nothing. There was no hard ball to them, and and if you want cabbage, okay, then and you could eat them like cabbage, cook them like or whatever, but they weren't Brussels sprouts. Yeah. So, any other questions? Oh,
You mentioned hotbeds, but what about cold frames? Are they different? Because from what I know, it can snow on top of cold frames, and whatever's underneath is okay. As long as you remove it, everything else is as long as it's not cold frames.
cold frames.
Growing in the winter.
Cold frames for growing in the winter.
Uh,
I guess it's the same idea, but
I don't know. I've never done that myself, so I don't have much experience with that. If you got lots of time, you can try it. Uh, somehow most plants won't grow good when they're frozen. So
My friend, she said it takes so much time in the summer to do all our weeding and to do our harvesting and freezing, and she says, I don't want a hotbed or a or a what do you call these houses? Greenhouse, yeah, it does give you 2 more months of good growing,
and
but
you can grow vegetables all winter in the greenhouses. They got acres and acres. You go down by what place there by Windsor, the side of Windsor. But anyway, you got miles and miles of greenhouse. That's where you get your greenhouse tomatoes, cucumbers, and that. They grow well, but they have grow lights, and they keep the temperature just right, and that and the moisture just right. So you can grow, but if you got nothing else to do, commercially this is their business, unless you want to take a lot of time. If you got lots of time and nothing else to do it.
but the big thing for me, I'm eager to get my food in the freezer for the winter, and once we get it in there, okay, then we can still eat for fresh a little bit, but we don't want it to grow on into the winter. We got other things we have to do, if you don't, now that's the big important thing. We didn't mention how important a very large freezer is if you're going to eat all year off your garden. You grow a lot, but what are you going to do with it? I've got a friend, and she grows a big garden, and she just lets her neighbors come and get it all. Us, we get it as quick as we can, get it into the freezer, then you've got it all year, and then you don't have to worry about trying to keep it, for so long after.
You got to realize for the greenhouse, you got to keep it at a certain temperature. You got grow lights, and it does cost money to heat it somehow. Unless you cut out of wood and you stand there, put wood in the thing, keep it warm. That's what my friend did all night. He'd get out there and fire up in the night. But it wasn't an even temperature that way. Now the freezer we got 2 freezers at home. We got one 27 cubic foot. My parents bought it brand new in 1967. It's still going good. And we got an upright one besides. That one, they say how much money you can save if you buy new stuff, more efficient. I keep my cellar just above freezing in the wintertime. We got 2 freezers down there and 1 fridge. The other thing, when I look at my hydro bill, it's running almost half my hydro bill is delivery charges and tax. So how much am I going to save by spending thousands of dollars to get new stuff when over half my bill doesn't even have to do anything with how much I use for the delivery and the tax? Of course, if you have your freezer in an apartment, as long as I have something hot, it might be good to get a modern one. I don't know, but I'm just saying, personally, I haven't gone that way. And some of these new outfits don't last very long either, 10 years. The older ones just seem to last forever. I know with the sawmill, I talked to the machinery company, and this one item were $450 when I built the mill 50 years ago. They're $7,300 a piece now. And I said, and he said, you won't get over 10 years out of that thing now. It'll be wore out. The ones I bought 50 years ago, they're still going. I got a good deal on them. Then I only paid $69 a piece, $72 a piece at that time. But that was a real good deal. But they just went and went and went. But this is the new stuff. And a lot of this new stuff, I know my son, you get a washing machine, you get this and that. It's all electronic, and it just seems to last a few years, it's gone. So if you don't have any more questions, we can have our break now. And we'll do some practical stuff.
15 minutes, and we're going to show you how we do these things we've talked about.